The dust cloud on the horizon grew larger as the two women urged their exhausted horses toward the sprawling ranch house that sat like a fortress against the endless Montana sky. Sarah Mitchell clutched the reins with white knuckles, her once pristine traveling dress now stained with sweat and grime from 3 days of hard riding. Beside her, Emma Hartwell sat straighter in her saddle, despite the obvious pain in her left arm, her jaw set with the determination that had carried her through 2 years of widowhood. "There," Sarah gasped, pointing toward the impressive structure ahead. "That has to be the Rocking M Ranch." Emma squinted against the afternoon sun, taking in the sight of the main house, a 2-story log and stone building that spoke of prosperity and permanence. Outbuildings dotted the landscape: barns, corrals, bunkhouses, and workshops that indicated this was no small operation. Cattle grazed in distant pastures, and the sound of hammering suggested ongoing construction. "It's bigger than I expected," Emma murmured, unconsciously straightening her shoulders. Even in their desperate circumstances, she refused to appear weak or defeated. Sarah's horse stumbled slightly, and she had to fight to keep her seat. The animal was as exhausted as they were, pushed beyond endurance in their flight from the horror they'd left behind. "Do you think he'll help us?" "He has to," Emma replied, though her voice carried more hope than certainty. "Marcus Dalton is our only chance." They'd heard stories about Marcus Dalton throughout the territory, a man who'd built an empire from nothing, who commanded respect and fear in equal measure, who was known for his fairness, but also his ruthlessness when crossed. Some said he was a gentleman rancher with Eastern education and refined manners. Others claimed he was a former gunfighter who traded his 6 guns for cattle brands. All agreed on one thing: he was the most powerful man in 3 counties, and his word was law on his land. As they approached the main house, several ranch hands emerged from various buildings to watch their arrival. Sarah felt their curious stares like physical weight, acutely aware of how she and Emma must look. 2 bedraggled women riding half-dead horses, their faces etched with exhaustion and desperation. A tall man stepped onto the wide front porch, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Even at a distance, Marcus Dalton commanded attention. He was easily 6 feet tall with broad shoulders that filled out his white shirt, dark hair that caught the sunlight, and an air of absolute confidence that seemed to radiate from him like heat from a forge. "Ladies," he called out, his voice carrying easily across the yard, "you look like you've been riding hard. Step down and rest yourselves." Sarah practically fell from her saddle, her legs shaking with fatigue. Emma dismounted more gracefully despite her injured arm, years of frontier living evident in her practiced movements. A young ranch hand hurried forward to take their horses' reins. "Water them slowly, Tommy," Dalton instructed. "They're about done in." His dark eyes, brown, Sarah realized as he approached, took in every detail of their appearance, with the assessing gaze of a man accustomed to reading people quickly and accurately. Up close, Marcus Dalton was even more impressive. He appeared to be in his mid-30s, with a face that was handsome in a rugged, masculine way. A small scar above his left eyebrow and calloused hands spoke of a life that hadn't always been spent giving orders from a porch. But it was his eyes that held Sarah's attention. Intelligent, calculating, but not unkind. "I'm Marcus Dalton," he said, touching the brim of his hat in a gesture that was both polite and somehow proprietary. "And you ladies are?" "Sarah Mitchell," Sarah managed, her voice hoarse from dust and exhaustion. "And this is Emma Hartwell. We need your help, Mr. Dalton. Mrs. Mitchell, Mrs. Hartwell." His use of their married titles was deliberate, Sarah realized. He'd noted their wedding rings, the black mourning bands they both wore. "Why don't you come inside where it's cooler? Maria can bring you some water and food." The interior of the house was as impressive as the exterior. High ceilings, quality furniture that spoke of both comfort and taste, and an overall sense of permanence that made Sarah's chest tight with longing. How long had it been since she'd felt truly safe, truly at home? Dalton led them to a spacious sitting room where a Mexican woman appeared almost immediately with a tray of water, coffee, and sandwiches. Sarah fell on the food with embarrassing hunger, while Emma sipped her water more carefully, her eyes never leaving their host's face. "Now then," Dalton said, settling into a leather chair that seemed designed for his large frame. "What brings two ladies to my ranch in such obvious distress?" Sarah looked at Emma, silently asking her to take the lead. Emma had always been better with words, more confident in dealing with men of power and influence. "Mr. Dalton," Emma began, her voice steady despite their circumstances. "We're widows, both of us. Our husbands died in a mining accident 6 months ago, and we've been trying to make a go of their claims ever since." "The Hartwell and Mitchell claims up near Silver Creek," Dalton said, surprising them both. "I know them. Good ground from what I hear." "It was," Sarah said bitterly, "until Silas Blackwood decided he wanted it for himself." Dalton's expression darkened at the mention of Blackwood's name. "Go on." Emma's hand unconsciously moved to her injured arm. "Blackwood's been pressuring us to sell for months. When we refused, he escalated his methods. 3 days ago, his men came to our claims. They burned Sarah's cabin, destroyed our equipment, and when I tried to stop them," she gestured to her arm. "They broke it," Sarah finished, her voice shaking with remembered terror. "And Blackwood said if we didn't sign over our claims within a week, next time they'd do worse than break bones." Dalton was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes thoughtful. "Silas Blackwood is a snake, but he's a careful snake. He wouldn't make such blatant threats without believing he could back them up." "He has the sheriff in his pocket," Emma said flatly, "and half the territorial judge's debts. We have nowhere else to turn, Mr. Dalton. We heard you were a fair man, a man who didn't tolerate claim jumpers and bullies." "What exactly are you asking me to do?" Sarah leaned forward, desperation making her bold. "Protect us. Help us work our claims. We're not asking for charity. We'll pay you back every cent, with interest. We just need someone Blackwood won't dare cross." Dalton stood and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back as he looked out at his domain. Sarah found herself studying his profile, noting the strong jaw, the way his shirt stretched across his broad back. Even in their desperate situation, she couldn't help but be aware of him as a man, something she hadn't felt since her husband's death. "Your claims are good ones," he said finally. "Rich ore, easy access to water, close enough to town for supply runs. They're worth fighting for." Hope flared in Sarah's chest. "Then you'll help us?" Dalton turned back to face them, and Sarah saw something in his expression that made her pulse quicken. Not just calculation, but something warmer, more personal. "I'll help you," he said slowly. "But I have conditions." "Name them," Emma said immediately. Dalton's smile was slow and predatory, like a wolf who'd cornered his prey. "I want more than just repayment with interest, ladies. I want something Blackwood can never take away from me. Something that will give me permanent rights to those claims and everything on them." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean?" "I mean I want wives," Dalton said bluntly. "Both of you. Marry me, and I'll protect you, your claims, and anything else that's mine. Refuse, and you can ride back to Blackwood and take your chances with his tender mercies." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah stared at him in shock, certain she'd misheard. Beside her, Emma had gone very still, her face pale. That's impossible," Sarah stammered. "A man can't have 2 wives. It's illegal, it's immoral, it's practical," Dalton interrupted, Polygamy may be illegal in the territories, but common law marriage isn't. And out here, what matters isn't what some judge in Washington thinks, but what the community accepts. My word carries weight in this county, ladies. If I say you're both my wives, then that's what you are. Emma found her voice. Why? Why would you want such an arrangement? Dalton's expression grew serious. Because I'm tired of being alone. Because this ranch needs a woman's touch, or 2 women's touches. Because I've spent 15 years building something worth having, and I want someone to share it with. His eyes moved between them, frank in their appraisal. And because you're both beautiful, intelligent women who deserve better than what Blackwood has planned for you. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks at his blunt assessment. Mr. Dalton, we barely know you. The idea of marriage to a stranger is preferable to the idea of being murdered by Blackwood's thugs, Dalton said matter-of-factly. At least, I would think so. Emma stood abruptly, pacing to the window with quick, agitated steps. This is insane. We came here asking for help, not this. And I'm offering help, Dalton replied calmly. The most complete help possible. As my wives, you'd have my name, my protection, and my resources. Your claims would become part of my holdings, which means Blackwood would have to go through me to get to them. And I promise you, ladies, Silas Blackwood is not fool enough to cross Marcus Dalton directly. Sarah's mind reeled with the implications. Marriage to this man, this stranger, would solve all their immediate problems. They'd be safe, secure, protected. But at what cost? What would you expect from us? She asked quietly. In such a marriage? Dalton's smile was knowing. Everything a husband has a right to expect from his wives. Companionship, partnership in running this ranch, and yes, the physical intimacies that come with marriage. I'm not proposing a business arrangement, ladies. I'm proposing real marriages, with all that entails. Emma whirled around, her eyes blazing. You're talking about buying us, using our desperation to get what you want. I'm talking about a mutually beneficial arrangement, Dalton corrected. You need protection and security. I need wives and partners. We can give each other what we need. Sarah looked at Emma, seeing her own conflicted emotions reflected in her friend's face. The proposal was shocking, unconventional, and completely outside anything they'd ever imagined. But it was also their only real option. How long do we have to decide? Sarah asked. Until tomorrow morning, Dalton replied. Blackwood's deadline is in 4 days. If you're going to accept my proposal, we need time to make the arrangements and present a united front. As if summoned by his words, the sound of approaching horses echoed from outside. Dalton moved to the window, his expression darkening. Speaking of the devil, he muttered, it seems Silas Blackwood has come calling. Through the window, Sarah watched a group of 8 riders approach the ranch house, their leader a man she recognized with a sick feeling in her stomach. Silas Blackwood sat his horse like a king surveying his domain, his silver hair gleaming in the afternoon sun, and his cold blue eyes taking in every detail of the rocking M with calculating interest. Stay here, Marcus commanded, his voice carrying an authority that brooked no argument. Don't let him see you until I know what he wants. But Sarah had already moved to the side of the window where she could observe without being seen. Emma joined her, both women watching as Marcus stepped onto the front porch with the casual confidence of a man on his own land. Blackwood, Marcus called out, his tone neutral but not welcoming. What brings you to my ranch? Silas Blackwood was a handsome man in his 50s, with the kind of refined features and expensive clothes that spoke of Eastern money and education. But Sarah had learned to see past the polished exterior to the cold calculation beneath. He dismounted with practiced grace, his movements those of a man comfortable with violence despite his gentleman's appearance. Dalton, Blackwood replied, approaching the porch with a smile that never reached his eyes. I hope you don't mind the intrusion. I'm looking for two women who seem to have gone missing from their claims up near Silver Creek. Missing women? Marcus's voice carried just the right note of mild interest. That sounds serious. Have you contacted the sheriff? The sheriff is occupied with other matters, Blackwood said smoothly. These particular women have been causing some trouble, making wild accusations about legitimate business dealings. I'm concerned for their safety, riding alone in the wilderness in their emotional state. Sarah felt Emma tense beside her. The casual dismissal of their accusations as the hysterics of emotional women was exactly what they'd expected, but it still stung. What kind of trouble? Marcus asked, leaning against a porch post with deceptive casualness. Claims disputes, mostly. The women inherited some mining property from their late husbands, but they lacked the expertise to work the claims properly. I've made several generous offers to purchase the land, but they've been unreasonable in their demands. Unreasonable how? Blackwood's smile grew thinner. They seem to believe their claims are worth far more than market value. Grief can cloud judgment, as I'm sure you understand. I'm simply trying to help them see reason before they make decisions they'll regret. Marcus was quiet for a moment, and Sarah could practically see him weighing his words. I haven't seen any women matching that description, Blackwood. But if I do, I'll be sure to let them know you're concerned about their welfare. I'd appreciate that. Blackwood's tone remained pleasant, but Sarah caught the steel beneath the silk. Of course, if someone were harboring these women, preventing them from returning to settle their affairs, well, that could be seen as interference in legitimate business. The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. Marcus straightened slowly, and Sarah saw his hand move almost imperceptibly closer to the gun at his hip. Are you suggesting someone might be holding these women against their will? Marcus asked, his voice dangerously quiet. I'm simply saying that sometimes people can be misled about the true nature of a situation. These women have been telling stories about threats and violence, but of course, there's no evidence to support such claims. The word of hysterical widows against respected businessmen. Blackwood shrugged eloquently. Respected businessmen, Marcus repeated. Like yourself. Exactly. Blackwood's confidence was absolute. I'm sure you understand the position I'm in, Dalton. I can't allow false accusations to damage my reputation or interfere with legitimate business ventures. Marcus stepped down from the porch, and Sarah noticed that several of his ranch hands had appeared from various buildings, their presence casual, but their attention focused. The balance of power was shifting, and Blackwood's men seemed to sense it. I understand perfectly, Marcus said. You're a businessman protecting your interests, just like I'm a rancher protecting mine. Of course, and I'm sure a man of your experience understands that some problems require direct solutions. The two men faced each other in the dusty yard, and Sarah felt the tension crackling between them like electricity before a storm. These were two alpha males marking territory, each testing the other's resolve. Direct solutions, Marcus mused. Yes, I'm familiar with those. In fact, I've found them quite effective over the years. Blackwood's eyes narrowed slightly. I'm glad we understand each other. If you should happen to encounter these missing women, I trust you'll encourage them to return home and settle their affairs properly. If I encounter any women in distress on my land, Marcus replied, I'll certainly encourage them to do whatever they feel is best for their safety and well-being. The verbal sparring continued for several more minutes, each man probing for weakness while maintaining a veneer of civility. Finally, Blackwood remounted his horse, his frustration barely concealed beneath his polished exterior. Good day, Dalton. I hope we won't have any misunderstandings in the future. I'm sure we won't, Marcus replied. I'm a very straightforward man, Blackwood. What's mine, I keep. What threatens what's mine, I eliminate. After Blackwood and his men rode away, Marcus returned to the house, his expression grim. Sarah and Emma were waiting in the sitting room, both pale, but determined. "He knows we're here," Emma said without preamble. "He suspects," Marcus corrected, "but suspicion isn't proof. However, it does change our timeline considerably." Sarah felt her heart racing. "What do you mean?" Marcus began pacing, his long strides eating up the length of the room. "Blackwood won't give up easily. He'll be back, probably with more men and a trumped-up legal justification. We need to present him with a fait accompli before he can act." "You mean your proposal?" Emma said quietly. "I mean my proposal." Marcus stopped pacing and faced them both. "Ladies, I'm going to be blunt. Blackwood is a dangerous man with powerful connections. The only thing that will stop him from taking what he wants is if those claims become legally mine through marriage to both of you." Sarah's mouth went dry. Tonight, Marcus confirmed. "I can have a preacher here within 2 hours. We'll have a ceremony, file the papers in town tomorrow, and present Blackwood with a legal marriage that even his bought judges can't overturn." Emma stood abruptly, her face flushed. "This is happening too fast. We need time to think, to consider." "Time is what we don't have," Marcus interrupted. "Blackwood will be back before dawn with a warrant or a writ or some other legal fiction that gives him the right to search my property. Once you're my wives, you're under my protection in ways that even he can't challenge." Sarah looked at Emma, seeing her own fear and uncertainty reflected in her friend's eyes. They were being asked to make a decision that would change their lives forever, and they had mere hours to decide. "What kind of marriage are you proposing exactly?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I mean, the practical arrangements." Marcus's expression softened slightly. "You'd both have your own rooms initially. Time to adjust to the situation. I'm not a monster, Sarah. I won't force unwilling women into my bed." "But eventually," Emma pressed, "eventually I'd hope for real marriages in every sense. I want partners, not prisoners. I want wives who choose to be with me, not women who feel trapped by circumstances." Sarah studied his face, looking for signs of deception or cruelty. Instead, she saw something that surprised her: loneliness. This powerful, successful man was as alone as they were, just better at hiding it. "Why us?" she asked suddenly. "You could have any woman in the territory. Why 2 desperate widows with nothing to offer but trouble?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd heard it. "Because you're survivors. Because you've faced loss and hardship and kept fighting. Because when Blackwood's men came for you, you didn't just roll over and accept defeat." He paused, his dark eyes intense. "And because from the moment you rode into my yard, I felt something I haven't felt in years." "What?" Emma whispered. "Hope," Marcus said simply. "Hope that maybe I don't have to spend the rest of my life alone." The honesty in his voice was devastating. Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes, remembering her own loneliness, the empty nights since her husband's death, when she'd wondered if she'd ever feel truly connected to another person again. "If we agree," she said carefully, "what guarantees do we have? How do we know you won't become just another man trying to control us?" Marcus walked to a large safe in the corner of the room. Working the combination with practiced ease, he withdrew several documents and spread them on the coffee table. "These are the deeds to your claims," he said. "And this is a contract I had my lawyer draw up this afternoon while you were resting." Sarah stared at him in shock. "This afternoon? But you only just proposed—" "I've been thinking about this since the moment you told me your story," Marcus admitted. "The contract states that in the event of my death, or if either of you chooses to leave the marriage, you retain full ownership of your original claims, plus a substantial settlement from my estate." Emma leaned forward to read the document, her eyes widening. "This is incredibly generous." "It's fair," Marcus corrected. "I'm asking you to take an enormous risk, to trust a man you barely know with your lives and your futures. The least I can do is ensure you're protected if things don't work out." Sarah felt something shift inside her chest, a loosening of the tight knot of fear and desperation she carried for months. This man was offering them not just protection, but genuine partnership. "The preacher," she said quietly. "Can you really get one here tonight?" Marcus nodded. "Reverend Patterson owes me several favors. He'll come." Emma looked at Sarah, and in that look, Sarah saw the same desperate hope she felt herself. They were standing at a crossroads, and every path led into unknown territory. But at least this path offered the possibility of something better than mere survival. "All right," Emma said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were agreeing to. "We'll do it." Sarah nodded, her heart pounding. "Yes, we'll marry you, Marcus Dalton." Marcus's smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. "Then let's get started. We have a wedding to plan and a future to secure." The ceremony took place in Marcus's spacious living room as the sun set behind the Montana mountains, casting long shadows through the tall windows. Reverend Patterson, a thin man in his 60s with kind eyes and weathered hands, had arrived within 2 hours as promised, bringing with him the legal documents necessary to make the unconventional union official. Sarah stood to Marcus's right, wearing a blue dress that Maria had somehow procured and altered to fit her in the space of an hour. Emma stood to his left in a deep green gown that complemented her auburn hair. Both women had bathed and arranged their hair as best they could, and despite the rushed circumstances, they looked beautiful in the golden lamplight. Marcus had changed into a black suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and commanding presence. He stood between them with quiet confidence, his large hands gentle as he took first Sarah's hand, then Emma's. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Patterson began, his voice carrying the authority of decades spent performing life's most sacred ceremonies. "We are gathered here in the sight of God to join these 3 souls in holy matrimony." Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. Just hours ago, she'd been a desperate widow fleeing for her life. Now she was about to become wife to a man she'd known for less than a day. The surreal nature of the situation made her feel as though she were watching someone else's life unfold. "Marcus Dalton," the Reverend continued, "do you take Sarah Mitchell to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, until death do you part?" Marcus turned to face Sarah fully, his dark eyes serious and intent. "I do," he said, his voice carrying absolute conviction. "And do you, Sarah Mitchell, take Marcus Dalton to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, until death do you part?" Sarah looked into Marcus's face, searching for any sign of deception or cruelty. Instead, she saw strength, determination, and something that might have been tenderness. "I do," she whispered. The Reverend repeated the vows with Emma, who answered with the same quiet resolve that had carried her through 2 years of widowhood. When it came time for rings, Marcus produced 2 simple gold bands that somehow fit perfectly. "By the power vested in me by the territory of Montana," Reverend Patterson declared, "I now pronounce you husband and wives. Marcus, you may kiss your brides." Marcus turned first to Sarah, his hands framing her face with surprising gentleness. His kiss was soft, respectful, but she felt the promise of passion beneath the restraint. When he turned to Emma, Sarah watched her friend's eyes flutter closed as their lips met, and she felt an unexpected flutter of something that might have been jealousy. "Ladies and gentlemen," the Reverend announced with a smile, "I present to you the Dalton family." The small gathering, consisting of Maria, several trusted ranch hands, and the foreman, Jake Sullivan, erupted in applause and congratulations. Maria had prepared a wedding feast despite the short notice, and soon the dining room was filled with laughter, music from Jake's fiddle, and the warm camaraderie of people celebrating new beginnings. As the evening wore on, Sarah found herself relaxing for the first time in months. Marcus was an attentive host, ensuring both his new wives were comfortable and included in every conversation. He told stories of his early days building the ranch, listened with genuine interest to their accounts of life in the mining camps, and gradually drew them into the easy banter of his extended ranch family. "So how did you end up in Montana?" Emma asked during a lull in the conversation. Marcus's expression grew distant. "I came west after the war. Like a lot of men, I was looking for a fresh start, a place where the past didn't matter as much as what you could build with your own hands." "You were a soldier?" Sarah asked. "Union cavalry. Spent 4 years learning that there are worse things than being alone." He took a sip of whiskey, his eyes reflecting old pain. "When it was over, I had some money saved, a good horse, and no desire to go back to what I'd left behind in Ohio." "What did you leave behind?" Emma pressed gently. Marcus was quiet for so long that Sarah thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he said, "A fiancé who decided she preferred a man who hadn't seen too much of the world's ugliness. Parents who thought I'd changed too much to fit back into their idea of civilized society. A life that felt like wearing clothes that no longer fit." Sarah felt a pang of sympathy for this man who had seemed so confident and self-assured. "So you came here and built all this?" "I came here and found something worth building for," Marcus corrected. "This land, these people who depend on me. The idea that maybe I could create something lasting and good." As the celebration wound down and the guests began to disperse, Sarah felt her nervousness returning. The practical reality of their situation was beginning to sink in. She was married to a man she barely knew, sharing him with her best friend, about to spend her wedding night in a stranger's house. Marcus seemed to sense her anxiety. "Ladies," he said quietly, "I think it's time we discuss the sleeping arrangements." Sarah's cheeks burned with embarrassment, but she forced herself to meet his eyes. "Yes, I suppose we should." Marcus led them upstairs to a long hallway lined with doors. "This is the master suite," he said, indicating a door at the end of the hall. "And these are the 2 guest rooms I had prepared for you." He opened 2 doors across the hall from each other, revealing beautifully appointed bedrooms, each with its own fireplace, comfortable furniture, and large windows overlooking the ranch. "They're lovely," Emma said, genuine appreciation in her voice. "I want you both to know," Marcus said seriously, "that these rooms are yours for as long as you want them. There's no pressure, no expectations beyond what we've already agreed to. We're married, yes, but that doesn't mean you owe me anything you're not ready to give." Sarah felt a rush of gratitude for his consideration. "Thank you. That means more than you know." Marcus nodded, then surprised them both by taking each of their hands. "I know this situation is unusual, and I know you're both taking an enormous leap of faith. I want you to know that I don't take that lightly. You're not just my wives now, you're my partners, and I'll treat you as such." "What happens tomorrow?" Emma asked. "When we face the world as this. Tomorrow we go to town and file the marriage certificates. We make it clear to everyone, including Blackwood, that you're under my protection now, and then we start building a life together." Sarah looked around at the comfortable hallway, at the man who was now her husband, at Emma, who was now her, sister-wife. The terminology felt strange, but the reality was beginning to feel less frightening and more like possibility. "Marcus," she said impulsively, "why aren't you afraid? This arrangement is as unusual for you as it is for us." Marcus smiled, and for the first time since they'd met him, he looked almost boyish. "Who says I'm not afraid? I'm terrified. I've been alone for 15 years, and now I have two beautiful, intelligent women depending on me for their safety and happiness. The responsibility is staggering." "But," Emma prompted. "But I'd rather be terrified and hopeful than safe and empty," Marcus said simply. "You two rode into my life like a gift I didn't know I needed. I'm not going to waste that gift by being cautious." Later, as Sarah prepared for bed in her new room, she reflected on the extraordinary day. She was married to a man who seemed honorable and kind, living in a house that felt more like home than anywhere she'd been since childhood, and for the first time in months, she felt safe. A soft knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting Maria with extra blankets or towels. Instead, Marcus entered carrying a tray with tea and small cakes. "I thought you might be hungry," he said. "It's been a long day." Sarah pulled her robe tighter around herself, acutely aware that she was alone with her new husband in her bedroom. "That's very thoughtful." Marcus set the tray on the small table by the window and turned to face her. In the lamplight, he looked younger, less intimidating. "Sarah, I want you to know that what I said earlier about no pressure or expectations, I meant it. But I also want you to know that this isn't just a business arrangement for me." "What do you mean?" Marcus stepped closer, his eyes intense. "I mean that when I look at you, I don't just see a woman I'm protecting or a partner in a practical arrangement. I see someone I could genuinely care for, someone I want to know in every way possible." Sarah's breath caught. "Marcus, I'm not asking for anything tonight," he said quickly. "I just wanted you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here. And I'll do everything in my power to make you happy." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Good night, Sarah. Sleep well." "Good night," she whispered, watching him leave. As she settled into the comfortable bed, Sarah realized that, for the first time since her first husband's death, she was looking forward to tomorrow. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them as part of something larger than herself. A family, unconventional though it might be. Down the hall, she could hear the low murmur of voices as Marcus spoke with Emma, probably offering her the same reassurances he'd given Sarah. The thought should have made her jealous, but instead it made her feel secure. This man, who was now her husband, was honorable enough to treat both his wives with equal consideration and respect. Outside her window, the Montana night was vast and star-filled, full of possibilities she was only beginning to imagine. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight Sarah Mitchell Dalton was exactly where she belonged.